Welcome back, everyone, to the House of Hustle podcast here on Sports Radio 810. We are presented, as always, by our friends at Charlie Hustle, as well as Capital Investment Management. A big thank you to Chase and Greg over at Charlie Hustle, as well as David Garrison over at Capital Investment Management. I'm Jarrett Sutton, joined as always by my co-host Steven St. John. And Steven, it's March 1st. It's go time. NCAA tournament is nearing. We got some big-time college basketball coming up. The madness begins here soon.
March Madness is in full effect, and it's very exciting because we've got lots to talk about. And but you know what? It was cool because the last episode we spent a little bit of time talking about women's basketball, and that got a pretty good response. And so why not start there? Because there's a couple of interesting stories right now. We started with Caitlin Clark last time. We'll start again with Caitlin Clark. She makes the announcement that she is not going to come back for another year at Iowa, and that would have been her COVID year.
Yep.
Instead, she's going to advance to the WNBA, where she'll be the number one overall pick by Indiana. And some people were joked, she's going to take a huge pay cut by going to the WNBA. But all of those endorsements will follow her to the pros, and also she'll get a lot more. But the question I have for you is, clearly or at least from my perspective, women's college basketball seems to be more popular than WNBA, and it certainly gets more, on Sports Center, on ESPN, more talk about it. The tournament, she has elevated women's college basketball and the interest in it, right?
Yep.
Can she do that to the WNBA? Like what? Because she's going to go with a bunch of great players, right? Even better, at a higher level of basketball. But can she do for the WNBA what she's done for women's college basketball?
Yes, the answer is yes, in my opinion. I kind of look back to the Davidson days with Steph, and Steph didn't go number one overall, obviously, but everybody was aware of his overall game, and I don't think we thought Steph was going to be the face of the league like we've seen Steph now as a Hall of Famer, greatest shooter of all time. But I think with Caitlin right now, her game translates automatically right away. She will be the number one overall pick.
Is that a good market for her to go to? I mean, Indiana's
absolutely.
Basketball, it's a basketball crazy, right?
It's a basketball state.
So it seems like that's a match made in heaven.
Indiana basketball is like Texas football, right? It's very similar to that. And I do think there's reasons why she's foregoing her COVID year, because she knows she's going to be the number one overall pick. And I think she wants to go play in Indiana. I think she's ready to kind of take that next step. Her numbers, her production, all her accomplishments. I know she wants to win a national championship to kind of put the cherry on top this year. But, she'll be the number one overall pick. And I do think she can elevate the WNBA game because of, right now, the focus and attention that surrounds her. I mean, she makes this decision and has a press conference, and it's everywhere, right? Everybody wants to know, what she's doing. I think this was kind of looming around. So I think timing-wise, to do it now, I thought she'd wait for the end of the year. So she wanted to get ahead of it. She does it now. And to your point, all these endorsements and sponsors, they're going to follow her. She's leaving the NIL space, but it's not like things are going to change for her in terms of her financial incentives to play at the next level. And the WNBA is hungry for her to get there. She adds a different dimension. She's highly competitive. I think we kind of missed on that last time. We were talking more about her skill and her game and how she impacts the game on the floor. But I think just her competitive nature, she's a winner at heart, and the number one overall pick. She'll be a number one overall pick that everybody's going to follow and see how she does the WNBA game. But it will elevate the game, the competitiveness, and when she gets to the league, all those WNBA players know that she's the face of women's basketball, and I think that's just going to elevate everybody at the next level.
All right, so that takes us to the next topic from women's basketball, and she might be next as the face of women's basketball. Juju Watkins at USC. And I was looking at some videos a little bit earlier today of fans lined up after practice for like an hour, waiting just to take pictures with her and get autographs. Same thing after games, the number of 30-point games she's put up. She's just a freshman. So for people that aren't familiar with her game, tell people about Juju Watkins.
Yeah, she's a absolute bucket getter. Very dynamic off the bounce. She can shoot it. She's a great athlete. And I think on the USC team she's on, has to do a little bit of everything, just like Caitlin. Her volume is probably higher than Caitlin's in terms of she has to shoot the ball a lot, but she can also get her own shot at any time. She's just very good at separating and creating her own shot. Her efficiencies are pretty solid in terms of how much attention gets put on her from defenses. She's shooting around 42 from the field and 35 from three. It's not bad. She's a freshman, and she's averaging 28 points a game, 7 rebounds, 2.5 steals. So impacting the game similar to Caitlin. She's kind of following in those footsteps. So for a freshman to be doing what she's doing, she doesn't play like a freshman, and she's got just an advanced skill set. And I think this is what's great about the women's game is, with Caitlin and Juju, I mean, Juju's kind of just waiting in the wings. Once Caitlin goes to the WNBA, she's going to take over that pedestal of being the best player in the women's college basketball game. And it'll be fun to follow her as she continues to, go through her career because she's a talent. And if you get a chance to watch her play or watch even some of her clips and highlights, she's different in so many ways, just like Caitlin was as a freshman. So it's exciting to see where the women's game is at. I mean, we're talking about 2 premier talents, and they're not even in the WNBA yet, and there's still so many great players at the WNBA level that had, this type of experience in college. But these 2 players we're talking about are just different in terms of, like we said in our last podcast, the modern-day game, the modern-day skill set, the footwork, the ball handling, the ability to score it in so many different ways, the ability to shoot it, the creation, being able to create their own shot, be able to create for others, like just putting their imprint on a basketball game in so many ways where you watch them and think, that's the best player on the floor, and it's consistent. That's how Juju is.
All right, we have several topics to get into, but one of them I'm going to throw a curveball here at you because I got to mention my alma mater, the Kansas City Roos.
Okay.
They are having a season that not enough people are paying attention to and recognizing right now.
Okay.
They just came off of a big road win at Denver, and, of course, they're in the Summit League. And the UMKC men's basketball program, that's a program that I covered as a sports editor for the U News back in the day at UMKC. I was a student manager for head coach Lee Hunt. And when I was in school there, they had Tony Dumas, and Tony Dumas ended up being a first-round draft pick. And if they would have been affiliated with a conference back then when Dumas was there, they were an NCAA tournament quality team, but they just didn't have a conference affiliation. So now it's all these years later, they still haven't made an NCAA tournament. So after their win now, they have won 5 games in a row. They are 9-6 in the conference, and their conference, their final conference game is coming up Sunday at Oral Roberts. And Oral Roberts is only 5-10 in the conference, so the Roos will be favored to win. They could end up 10-6 in the conference, and right now, because the tiebreakers are in second place, so if they win on Sunday, they could wrap up the 2 seed in the Summit League tournament. And the number 1 seed is South Dakota State. They're 11-4 right now. Well, the Roos just beat them a couple of weeks ago. And usually, and you know this in the Summit League, there's usually like one team that's like 15-1.
Yeah,
right. And no one's beating them in the tournament. Well, that's not the case this year. And the Roos just beat the number 1 seed, and they're the hottest team in the conference. And they're going to go into, I don't remember ever saying this. They're going to go into the conference tournament with a legitimate chance to win it and go to the NCAA tournament. So Marvin Menzies in his second year deserves a massive amount of credit. And if you want, coming up next week, hopefully, we can get their assistant coach, Joe Esposito, who was an assistant under Tubby Smith at a couple of stops. Great guy, great recruiter. And his what he's been saying, his mantra at UMKC has been BAM, building a monster. And so in their second year, they made all these leaps and bounds. That's pretty damn cool.
Absolutely.
They could actually make the NCAA tournament, and they're a contender, and they're going to finish hopefully in second place in the conference.
That's why it's such an interesting time right now, because it's March 1st, and there's still plenty of ball ahead in terms of before we get to the NCAA tournament. And with that, these type of leagues that cool. have that conference tournament where so much is riding on the conference tournament, and the Summit is wide open, and UMKC is playing their best ball at the right time, which to me is the most important thing of it all, is that you're playing your best ball as you kind of lead up to the conference tournament. And UMKC's as hot as anybody and dangerous. So, yeah, congrats to Coach Menzie in year 2 to be where they're at. This is exciting. I know you're fired up. I know your family's probably fired up as well.
I was going to say this. Well, I shouldn't say. Maybe, who knows? If I'm feeling right, maybe if they make it to the conference championship game, me and fellow Rue Phil St. John might hop in a car and drive up there because
Father-son road trip.
If they're playing in the conference championship game with a chance to go to the NCAA tournament game, I better be there.
You better be there. I'm fully supportive of this.
Me and my kangaroo pouch will be there ready to support. Okay, so let's move on to some other topics. So, by the way, Rue up.
Rue up, baby. Let's go.
Kansas Jayhawks. They saw their 19-game home winning streak snapped by the men of BYU, right?
Yeah.
And so, look, we have seen Kansas struggle on the road this year. So it was startling to see him lose at home.
Yeah.
But Kevin McCullough's out. And now that's kind of up in the air whether he's going to come back or not. And he's a great player. But even with him, they're still a thin team. Without him, you see they have their issues. And now they got to go to Baylor. It's bizarre with a couple of weeks left, with 3 games left, they're out of it. Yeah. I'll ask you, has that ever happened? We were trying to rack our brains thinking about that. Have they ever just been out of the conference race with a couple of weeks left under Bill Self?
No. I think a couple years back, I remember them going through like a 3-game losing streak, but they were still in it. And then they got back into it at the very end because a couple teams dropping games. So, and right now, I just don't see Houston losing, and the loss to BYU pretty much.
Houston's got a 3-game lead over Kansas with 3 to play.
That pretty much sealed it against BYU at home,
and you got Iowa State in between them. So,
and I mean, Kansas got to go to Baylor, tough place to play, and we'll see about Kevin. There's the talk around Kevin is can he be somewhat healthy enough to get through the rest of the season? He's got to be ready for the NCAA tournament. That's most important. There was talk about, is he going to shut it down for the rest of the regular season and wait for the postseason? Now there's a chance he might play against Baylor. I know he wants to be on the floor. Like, he doesn't want to sit out games, especially when you watch your team lose a game and you know you're one of the best players on the team. It's a different mental, conversation to be had. If you want to get out on the floor and play, especially with a guy like Kevin, he's going to put himself in there regardless if he's healthy or not. But you just don't want to see any setbacks, most importantly. That would be worst-case scenario. Because I do think Kevin takes pressure off of others because of how he impacts the game on both ends of the floor. They need him defensively for sure. They need him offensively to attack. But being at that BYU game and seeing that upset, I mean, it felt like Kansas was in control for much of the game, but BYU never wavered. Give them credit. Like, they're a newcomer to the Big 12. It's their first game at Allen Fieldhouse. They step on the floor, and it's like, don't judge a book by its cover, right? Because you look out and you think, okay, Kansas has the size advantage. Kansas has the athleticism advantage, the length, all these different traits. And then the game gets going. BYU ran some great actions.
And look, and some teams
it was fun to watch.
Some teams are beat before they even get on the floor because they're intimidated.
Right.
And sometimes ignorance is bliss. Yeah. They're new in the conference, so hey, here we are at Allen Fieldhouse. They haven't gone through all this.
Yeah.
And so maybe that helped them from, like you said, not being intimidated or not, being able to keep their composure, even though there were a couple of times Kansas got up to an 11-point lead and you think, okay, there it is. There it is. But they never wavered.
Yeah, they never wavered. And, the double-digit deficits, you thought, okay, this is where Kansas goes away with it. And KU's probably thinking, we missed free throws. They missed some bunnies around the rim. They weren't great in the second half to close the game out. I think BYU, give them credit, like they stayed in the game in the rebounding category. They were only -3 on the glass. I thought they would get destroyed on the glass, and they were right around that. The difference in the game, and I think this is something that, we talked about going into the season with Kansas, is just 3-point shooting and 3-point volume. If you look at the box, BYU shot 38% from 3. They were 13 to 34. So 34 attempts. Kansas only had 15 attempts. They only made 3 threes. That's a discrepancy of 10 threes. That's the difference in the game of why BYU was in the game is 3-point shooting. They made shots, and it was almost like I was with my boss watching the game, and it was almost like anybody that BYU put on the floor was a threat from three, even their bigs. And they have bigs that can pass. They're very unselfish. Their actions are great. They bring a guy off the bench in Jackson Robinson who can really score it. He's probably their best athlete. He's a sophomore guard. So I just would not want to face BYU in the NCAA tournament because BYU struggled really bad against Kansas State. So you thought, well, BYU gets, K-State kind of handles them. Then they go to Kansas, and BYU looked like a different team. So BYU has been up and down in Big 12 play, but they're still as dangerous as anybody because they value the three-point shot. They have very much a modern-day approach with their offense, and they have bigs that, might not be that athletic, might not be that big, but very skilled, can pass. Passing bigs are so valuable in today's game, and you saw that in the BYU-Kansas game.
All right, so you mentioned Kansas is 3 games behind Houston. We still have a race. It's Houston at 12-3 and Iowa State at 11-4. But we brought up, and Houston's got to go to Oklahoma. That's not a given. And Iowa State's got to go to UCF, and UCF has wins over Texas Tech, Oklahoma, and KU at home, and so that's not a given. But Houston's in the driver's seat, right? Mm-hmm. And so we brought up this point. You go all over the nation scouting and watching college basketball. Be honest with you, it's their first year in the conference. I'm not really familiar with the Houston fan base and how they support their team. But you've got the Big 12 tournament coming up in Kansas City. If there was ever a year you were going to drive 11 hours or make the flight up from Houston, it's your first year in the Big 12 tournament. It's your first chance. I know they played in the NCAA tournament in Kansas City last year, but that's a different deal. You don't have that much time to plan and whatever else. You get to come to this unbelievable event that many people feel like is the best conference tournament as far as atmosphere, fan fest, everything. Yep. You're the number 1 seed, and maybe you start the Big 12 tournament as the number 1 team in the nation. Will there be a lot of Houston fans in Kansas City? Because I don't know enough about their fan base.
Yeah, I think so.
Wouldn't if you were and their spring break coincides with the Big 12 tournament, right? Like if you're a Houston student, wouldn't you hop in a car and just drive up here? I mean,
it's funny. My aunt and uncle live down in Houston, and they're huge basketball fans, and they've kind of gotten behind this Houston Cougar team. They're coming up to Kansas City for the tournament.
There it is.
So they want to be around it. I think Houston fans will travel. I was down there for one of their games against Texas at home in the Fertitta Center. It was packed, loud. Everybody's pretty excited about what they're doing. First year in the Big 12. They've had, obviously, a great program under Coach Sampson. He's really turned it around, and they've been a good team under his direction. But where they are right now is a real – and look, in the big picture of the men's game right now, I think UConn and Purdue, those are 2 teams that probably get talked about a lot of being real title contenders. Houston's right there. Their defense is one, if not the best defense in the country. I think it is the best defense in the country by how they can guard in different ways. And Jamal Shed is playing at an All-American level as a point guard. He is a force to be reckoned with. And they got L.J. Cryer from Baylor. So they're just a team that's fun to watch. Coach Sampson is an excellent coach. They are just a great basketball team, and they're probably not as talented maybe as some other teams, but they're still guys that, number one, are bought into each other, and they play the right way. They found ways, like the Baylor game, had a big lead, lost that lead, and find a way to win in overtime. They're battle-tested, and I think that's what makes this tournament. And just like any conference tournament, there's going to be some teams that need some wins in the Big 12 tournament, which always makes the conference tournament so much fun. Is there's a lot of games that matter to teams, even if they're not at the top. And the Big 12 is, without a doubt, probably the best conference in college basketball. The SEC is probably right behind it. And there's a lot of teams and a lot of conversation of how many teams from the Big 12 will get in the dance. And that's going to all kind of come to fruition in Kansas City.
So K-State's one of those teams that's probably going to need some wins in Kansas City, or at least a win. So they have to play at Cincinnati.
Yeah.
They play at Kansas, and then they come home to host Iowa State. Iowa State might be playing for at least a share of the Big 12 title. Who knows? And so, but hey, K-State could beat them at home. If there's no Kevin McCullough, that game at Kansas is all of a sudden interesting.
No question.
But at Cincinnati, that's tricky. To really feel good about their chances, how much of a challenge is this going to be for them to go to Cincy? Because you feel like if they win at Cincy and they can win one of the next 2 games, then they might be good and come in and not just lay an egg in Kansas City. So they put themselves back in position. What do you think about K-State and the work they have to do to get into the tournament?
So I think, look, Cincinnati is not a pushover or a walk in the park. It's not going to be a game where it's a road game. Coach Tang said it. It's going to be an NCAA tournament game to them. They have to have it, especially with what's ahead. They really need this win. The thing that's working in their favor, Cincinnati's lost 3 in a row. Now, they did, I think, play pretty tough against Houston. They lost by 8 to Houston, but they did lose at home to Oklahoma State, lost by 4. It was a pretty bad loss for them. Their last win was at UCF, which was a very competitive game. Kansas State is a team that, going to Cincinnati, they should be the favorite in this game. The question will be, can they play consistently? Can they put 40 games together? Can they close a game? These are all the question marks we've had around them. They had a big lead against West Virginia at home, 25-point lead, and then they were great in the first half. In the second half, they looked like a shell of themselves. They stopped guarding. They stopped doing what got them success in the first half. They're a good defensive team, and they need to kind of, rest their laurels on that. They need to be that for 40 minutes. That's got to be most important. With Perry and Kaluma and Cam Carter, those are their top 3. They have to be great every one of these games. It's pressure for sure, but all 3 of those guys have to bring it. They are too valuable. All 3 of them. It can't just be 1 or 2. All 3 of them, because all 3 of them play a significant role in them winning games. Point guard play, a defender, a versatile forward that can make threes and rebound. Those 3 impact the game every time for Kansas State, and they got to be consistent to not just beat Cincinnati, but to ultimately do what they want to do, and that's make the NCAA tournament, not be on the bubble. You don't want to be on the bubble. They're going to have work to do in Kansas City regardless, I think, but they need this win at Cincinnati, no question.
All right, rapid fire. I know we still have games left. Big 12 player of the year right now.
Oh, man. I'm leaning probably Jamal Shed with everything. I just think he's too valuable, and it's why Houston is where they are.
SEC player of the year.
SEC player of the year, give me Dalton Knecht from Tennessee.
Okay. National player of the year.
That will probably end up being, I would think, Zach Edey again. Yeah, I think I'd give the edge to Zach.
Who's the best player that you've seen live?
In college. Best player.
This year.
I mean, Dalton Knecht had just an incredible game at North Carolina earlier in the year. He was fantastic. R.J. Davis had 42 the other night. That was one of the more unbelievable games, too, in terms of shot making. In terms of best player, it's tough to go off of because there's a lot of guys probably that fit this criteria. Isaiah Collier is probably the most dynamic, pro guard ready from USC. I think Kansas State fans would say that earlier in the year when they played USC. He was so great in that game. I'd probably put Collier up there. And he's been banged up. He's been hurt at different times. But it'd be tough. It'd be him or Dalton Knecht's up there for sure. And then I do think Devin Carter has been excellent. I think he'll be Big East Player of the Year, should be Big East Player of the Year. He's a great story, and he's had an incredible season. And it's with them losing their second best player to an ACL injury, and he's stepped up and just been excellent. And the Big East is a big-time league, and he's been great all year.
All right. We've been focusing a lot on college basketball, but we have a special visitor that's watching us in the studio audience, our one-person studio audience, Phil St. John, and he demands NBA talk when he's live, and so we'll give him that. It's a wild Western Conference.
Yeah.
And so handicap what's going on at the top of the Western Conference for this wide-open battle for the number 1 seed. This is going to be fun to watch as you got the Timberwolves, the Thunder, and the Nuggets are all within a game and a half of each other, and the Clippers aren't too far behind, 4 games out. And so this thing's going to go right down to the wire.
Yeah, it's going to go right down the wire. And, I mean, it's great for the Western Conference because if you look right now, Minnesota and Oklahoma City being at the top, I think is great for the overall game. Right, I mean, you got Minnesota, OKC, who's a small market. OKC and Minnesota both kind of went through some rebuilds. OKC for sure. They have 2 of the premier young talents that could be the face of our league for a significant period of time. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's playing at an MVP level, and then Ant-Man with Anthony Edwards, who is just fantastic and was great with the USA team over the summer. Just a big-time talent, big-time scorer, all-star. He's just terrific. And then it starts getting into those teams that are going to be there. The Denver Nuggets with Jokic, who is just a problem, total game changer. Plays at an MVP level every game. It's just incredible to watch him play, watch his impact as a forward, his passing, his scoring, his rebounding, his toughness. He's just a talent to watch. And Denver, obviously the champs. Jamal Murray is healthy. That's always been most important to Denver, is those two guys being on the floor at the same time, and then those role pieces like MPJ and Aaron and those guys that really carried Denver to a title last year. Then it gets interesting because you got the Clippers with Kawhi and James and PG, as dangerous as a team as there is in the West, and they're the 4 seed. And then you got the 5 with Durant and Bradley Beal and our boy Booker. It's a scary big 3, very scary big 3. Then you got us, the Pelicans, at 6 right now. We're a deep team. We're a team that I think is just as dangerous as anybody as well. Zion and Brandon are playing at a big-time level. CJ is such a great vet, scoring guard, can play both the 1 and the 2. Great young players in Trey Murphy and Herb Jones. Herb's been excellent, has been shooting the ball at such a high level, should be first-team all-defense. And so, we're excited about where we are in the West. But it's just funny, if you look at the 4 play-in teams, Warriors, Lakers, Kings, and Mavericks.
Right.
Anybody that's up in that top 6, if the season were to end today, you can just throw seeding out the door, because whoever gets through the play-in, every playoff series is going to be fantastic, regardless of really what the seeding is. Those 3 teams at the top, Minnesota, OKC, Denver, with the plus 40 wins, those 3 teams have probably been the most consistent all year. They've been able to stay healthy for the most part. LA, Phoenix, ourselves in New Orleans, and then Dallas, Sacramento. Those, we've kind of been jockeying for positioning all year with those teams. And then you never want to sleep on LeBron and Steph.
Yeah, LeBron, they're the 9 and 10 seeds.
It's just wild. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I think we're around 20 games left for every team. It's a sprint to early April when the regular season concludes. So with so much going on in the NCAA tournament and right now with college, it's so exciting. But really, this is such an important stretch for all these teams in the West, because it just feels like every night, every game matters in terms of your positioning. You don't want to be in the play-in. The play-in is exciting. It's a great opportunity for teams to try to crack that 7-8 seed line. It is kind of that wild card feel to it. You don't want to be in the play-in, and right now it's just every game, whether you're at the 4 line or the 9 line, that can change every night of where you are right now in the standings. So it's going to be a lot of fun in this sprint to April.
You know who I'm rooting for?
The New Orleans Pelicans.
Besides the Pelicans?
Who you got?
Whoever plays the Lakers.
I think we might say the same thing. I think we might say the same thing.
It's just true.
Yeah.
But just go Pelicans.
Go Pelicans.
So this is going to be, I guess you'll call it interesting and busy time for you.
Yeah.
And so tell people what your upcoming schedule is, because your travel itinerary is madness in March. And so you got a lot coming up. So where are you going now?
So let's see. I'm going to go see Ole Miss play at Mizzou, just to see Ole Miss. Haven't seen Ole Miss play yet this year. So I'll be in Columbia.
Mizzou is going to win their first conference game.
Let's go.
Because Jared Sutton is in attendance.
Let's hope so.
I've said it now. Mizzou only lost by 3 at Ole Miss. Dennis Gates is going to tell the team that Jared Sutton is there, and they will win by 4.
How about that? I mean, we'd be talking about a Mizzou win on the pod, maybe. Who knows? But then, so after that,
we always wanted to.
I'll go NC State next week and go to Pitt for the first time. So I'm really excited about going to Pitt. They play Florida State. That'll be a good one. And then NC State Duke. So those are my 2 last games before I'll go K-State, Iowa State next weekend. And then it's Pac-12 tournament, Mountain West, and the WCC for me. Which I'll be out in Vegas for quite a while, long haul there. But
how long will you be in Vegas?
I think it's 8 days.
That's not good.
That's not good. That's not good.
It needs to cut off
every year. Exactly. Every year I kind of how can I avoid being there for that long? But it just
you go to the Sphere. I would like to go there.
I would like to go
right.
in this. I've been around the Sphere. I've never been inside the Sphere.
It would be a big basketball during the
Absolutely.
I don't know if that.
My favorite thing is when you're in a car and have to drive in Vegas and everybody just stops on the road.
Does it cause accidents?
Yeah, but it's fine.
All right. So now we've been a little lax in naming our hustlers of the month.
Yep.
And man, oh man, are there some candidates out there.
Yep.
So who have you had your eye on? Because Charlie Hustle wants to know who the hustlers of the month are.
Yeah. So our two, I'm gonna have hustlers of the month here. I'm going to go with Devin Carter, who just touched on at Providence, and then Dalton Knecht to Tennessee. So for those that don't know, Dalton Knecht just had 39 points the other night in a win at home, big-time win against Auburn, and he is a absolute killer. I mean, he's a great story because he's a transfer and came to Tennessee, and he's about 6'9". He's a kind of combo forward. Think kind of Gordon Hayward-esque. He's a very good shooter, very good athlete, and he has just been the best player in the SEC on a consistent basis. Now, Kentucky's got a lot of guys, too, that are very good. They're a dangerous team, but Dalton Knecht has been excellent all year, 30-point games. He's the top of the scouting report and just has so much to his game, and he's tough as nails, too, like competes, plays hard. He's a great story, too. Both these guys are older players, but they're just dominating their leagues, and it's the SEC and the Big East, and they're both very good. And these two guys were kind of off the radar. Devin, not so much. Devin was an excellent defender in the Big East, but now both these guys are just scoring the ball at a high, high level, and they should be National Players of the Year in their leagues. Devin Carter is long. He's shooting the ball so much better than he was in his previous seasons at Providence. Credit to our boy Kim English and the job he's done with Devin, who's just become a totally different player. And give Devin a lot of credit. This is a guy that has basketball in his bloodline, hard worker, relentless worker, and has become the player he is. I mean, he's better off the bounce, can finish at the rim, his shot making from deep, and I mean he's just been kind of an eye opener all year. I saw him play at Marquette. They got beat pretty good at Marquette. But Devin the ball's got to be in his hands so much, and he was more off the ball last year, and now he's just kind of putting it all together. His offensive game, his defensive game, highly versatile, and really going to be an interesting player at the next level as well.
And you mentioned Kim English in Providence. I mean, Devin Carter's the kind of kid you want to see in the NCAA tournament to see what he could do.
Yeah, no doubt.
They're right there.
Yep.
I know they've got to play. They got to play Georgetown. They've got a game coming up against Villanova, and then they get that last, big chance against UConn.
Yeah.
And so they have the opportunity still to make the NCAA tournament. It would be great to see a kid like Devin Carter in there, but how awesome would it be for our man Kim English in his first year at Providence to guide them into the NCAA tournament? I've seen them as the last team in. I've seen them the first four out, but hopefully they could pick up a couple of wins and solidify their spot in the NCAA tournament. That would be awesome.
It'd be great. I mean, especially when Bryce Hopkins was a great player that had returned to Providence. He was a Kentucky transfer. It was going to be basically Bryce and Devin kind of carrying the load for Providence and being those two like kind of combo duo for Providence. And then Bryce goes down with the injury probably a month and a half, 2 months ago. And then it's been all Devin, and they're still in a really good spot. They're still an 18-win team, and that says a lot because when you lose one of your best players and a player at the forward position who could play the 4 and the 5, kind of small ball 5, but mostly a 4 that could make shots, that could play on the post, that rebounds. He was one of the better players in the Big East, and you lose a player like that. So it's all on Devin. And Josh Odoris stepped up and played well. Ticket Gaines has played really well. So there's other guys that have stepped up for sure. But a lot of it has been on Devin. And to be a 19-point-per-game scorer, 8 rebounds a game, shooting 40 from 3, 48 from the field, 73 at the line. I mean, he's been efficient throughout this process. And I think the way that Kim has used Devin differently than maybe the previous regime really speaks to, I think, how Kim can coach. He's a very good coach in terms of the modern-day game and different actions and how to use different angles for players, different actions that they use on offense. And then defensively, they've been having to just withstand without Bryce. And that's not been an easy thing. But if they can get this done, and again, like you said, like big games ahead, games that are winnable for them. They've had some big wins this year. They're capable. They're a team you want to see in the tournament. I think it'd be fun for all college basketball fans to see Devin Carter in the NCAA tournament because he's just been that good all year, and he deserves it. He's Providence through and through, stayed at Providence through the coaching change. They love him in Providence, Rhode Island. I mean, Devin Carter is the guy. That fan base is awesome, too. They travel well. So I'd love to see Providence in the tournament. It'd be great. And the Big East should have, a few teams get in. It's a great league. It's not just UConn. We just touched on Creighton beating UConn last week. They got some really good teams that should be in the tournament.
We covered a lot of ground there, and so hopefully you enjoyed this episode of House of Hustle. We've got a couple more weeks, and then the madness really kicks in. My man, you ready?
I'm ready. I can't wait. It's going to be
fun. He's got his game face on. And until next episode, remember, Kansas City is for hustlers.